Very warm GenAI Summit welcome to the Prime Minister. It's such a pleasure to be here with you. I'm looking forward to having.
Thank you, Andreas. It's good to see you. We've known each other for a long time.
A long time. But more recently, one of the ways we got to know each other a little bit better was about a year ago, when you set up the high-level advisory committee. We've heard mention of it during the day-to-day by a couple other colleagues in the government. So you set up this high-level advisory committee on AI for Greece. And I'd love for people to hear what really prompted that decision. What were you hoping to accomplish through that?
Well, first of all, let me point out that I do believe that the AI revolution can be truly transformative for our country. We've suffered a lot over the past decade, emerging from a deep financial crisis. I think the country is clearly on more solid footing. The economy is growing. Our public finances are in order. But when I try to think about truly transformative steps that the country can take, especially when it comes to the business of government, obviously AI should present us with a tremendous opportunity. And if I take into consideration also the fact that we have many global experts in the AI field everywhere in the world, it seemed logical to me to bring some of these brilliant brains together to advise us on how AI could be a true opportunity for Greece in various areas, and I'm sure we can discuss them in more detail. So the idea behind this high-level AI committee was relatively simple. Present us with a strategy, with a document that is not just theoretical, but that highlights specific opportunities for fostering an AI innovation ecosystem in Greece, for using AI to improve the business of government, and for hopefully turning Greece into a leader when it comes to smart AI regulation. I know that regulation is a word that sometimes people treat with a certain degree of skepticism, but it is clear to me that some regulation will be necessary, but let's think about regulation as an opportunity and not just as a barrier. So I'm expecting, the report is more or less ready. I expect it to be officially presented to us within the next week. And then, of course, the challenge will be to make sure that we have the proper governance to implement many of the very interesting suggestions that will be presented in the report.
Well, we organized, on the committee, we organized ourselves against 4 different areas, right? One of them, actually, I wanted to start there, was the legal and regulatory framework. And today, in the prior discussions today, there was a lot of discussion around data collection, governance, use of AI, access to data, use of AI more generally in the public sector. How do you think Greece can play a leading role in this domain?
Well, first of all, we need to be aware that we exist within the European legal framework. So we're also bound by European regulations, not just the Digital Services Act, but also the AI Act, which will come into implementation. But, a broad European regulation sets the broad boundaries. So I think the challenge that we need to sort of address is whether we have regulatory opportunities within the broader framework of the AI Act to actually foster development of critical AI technologies in Greece, whether it's regulatory sandboxes or whether it's an understanding of how we treat anonymous data without sometimes the very strict constraints of data protection mentality that may come from the previous century. But at the same time, to also focus on those areas where we feel that we can actually play a leading role as Greece. One area which is to a certain extent related to regulation is has to do with the topic of what we call the ethics of AI. I mean, if Greece, as the birthplace of classical philosophy, cannot contribute to this discussion, I can't see which country will be able to do that. So making sure that when we talk about these complicated questions, we actually have a voice that can be heard. We can become a global center for these types of debates. We can bring leading thinkers around the ethics of AI to Greece. This seems to me to be, particularly important. And when it comes to I think to specific possible regulations, to have a pretty good understanding, which I think is also going to be the product of a vibrant debate like the one that is taking place here. I mean, what does AI for good mean, and what are the real risks of AI? In particular, when it comes to two topics which I care, obviously I care a lot about. The first is the broader discussion about AI and democracy and the impact of AI on the public debate. And the second, which is slightly more narrow, but still I think of great importance, and that is the impact of AI on children and teenagers, and in particular their mental brain, but also the way they learn and absorb information. I think these are topics which I think we can really be at the lead. We can be leaders also within the European Union in terms of smart regulation, without stifling, of course, the innovation that is so necessary to further develop AI as a transformative technology.
Well, specifically, you mentioned ethics, and obviously a big part of the world has had elections recently. There's all these questions about the impact of technology on the democratic process more generally, and there's also, frankly, a lot of concerns about the role of AI. It can be a great empowering tool, but it can also be a tool that potentially could thwart democracy. Some people are concerned. Do you have any high-level thoughts about what it is that we could do as a country, or even as Europe, in terms of either regulating or thinking about principles, whether they be explicit regulations or not, to make AI more of a boon to the democratic process?
Well, even before the significant breakthroughs of AI that have taken place over the past years, we knew that the big online platforms had a model that promoted engagement by essentially allowing people to communicate with other people who shared the same views with them. And of course, that sort of more polarizing content was rewarded in terms of engagement compared to sort of a more moderate discourse. So this notion of virtual sort of echo boxes where you only listen to people who reinforce your biases is a reality. And this is unfortunately only getting worse. So again, finding a ways for people to be exposed to different ideas and to have some sort of meaningful dialogue within the digital space it's not an easy suggestion, but we need to find a way to break this feedback loop where we only, at the end of the day, get exposed to information which reinforces our own biases. And I don't have an easy answer, but at least I know that this is a real problem. And then, of course, you add to the mix the way that AI can be weaponized by malign actors. The possibility that deep fakes can be can be created with great ease, and they can really catch up like fire. I mean, we had an instant today where we had a simple post which supposedly was done by my Minister of State stating something which he had never said. Very basic stuff that anyone can do, and until you actually realize that this is happening and you contain it, the damage may be done. And of course, the more we realize that someone like myself has been filmed numerous times, has been photographed numerous times, if one were to create a fake sort of video of myself, there's enough data to actually do it. And then until you realize what is happening, the damage actually may be done. So these are real threats. And of course, my fundamental belief is that we need to also have this honest discussion with the big tech companies, and they also need to understand that they have skin in the game and that they cannot sort of simply hide behind the fact that they're platforms and that the content that appears on these platforms is none of their business. So I think this discussion is beginning to happen with the big tech companies, and hopefully something good is going to come out of them.
You mentioned before, switching gears for a second, because I think we can come back to regulation and more, let's say, philosophical questions if we have time, about what is the nature of even knowing something, if now you can fake all kinds of things. But I don't want to get too philosophical, at least not yet. Switching gears a little bit, you mentioned children before and the ability to learn and having good learning outcomes. So education and research was one of the other major subcategories of the committee where we worked on a number of different thoughts. Clearly, in your administration, you've liberalized higher education through non-public, non-profit university programs, and education has been large, loomed large in your agenda for both of your administration so far. Specifically, when it comes to AI, do you have thoughts about how you could further promote your agenda around education?
Well, first of all, we clearly know that we will need more young people who are trained in the technical skills that will be necessary in the AI industry. And that, I think, is up to the universities themselves to offer these types of programs, but also to understand what upskilling in AI may mean for people who may already have a technical background. And there we'll also be looking to work not just with the academic community, but also with the private sector to understand what are the skills that we really need to offer around the broad AI space. The second very interesting topic is how is AI going to transform the educational process itself? And there I think the jury is still out, because of course the idea of having a personalized tutor to help children with their specific needs is in principle, very, very intriguing. But what we certainly learned during COVID is that there is no replacement for the classroom and the real interaction between the teacher and the children. And of course, I always see technology as an enabler and not as a replacer of human activity. It will happen in certain jobs, and we can talk about that in a bit. But certainly in the educational process, if, for example, we add a smart board, which we've done now to almost all Greek classrooms from 5th grade on, it is a transformative tool in terms of empowering the teacher to go out of his comfort zone and to find new material and to make the lesson itself much more engaging. This is not sort of rocket science technology, but it does really change the way the educational process is taking place. So I think we need to monitor this space very, very carefully. But let me just point out to a risk I see we need to be aware of, and this is a broader concern that I have. First of all, we know that sort of social media algorithms at a young age are addictive. They're designed to be addictive. And we know that this addiction has negative impacts on the mental health of children. I think this is an established fact. So we need to do something about it, whether it is educating our parents about the parental controls that already exist in the applications. We plan to do such an event because most parents who buy their kids their first smartphones are totally ignorant about the fact that already as we speak there are things you can do to restrict the use of a mobile phone and the applications by a parent. But of course there's also another topic which is of even greater concern to me. If writing in itself, I mean, is replaced by nice LLMs that can write better than we do, how will the kids learn how to write? Is it important for the kids to learn how to write? Is it important for the kids to memorize? If they can find any information they want online, how important is it to have this information, possess this information if it is all available? When we were at university, and we were the same university, Andreas was 2 years younger, we still did our research in libraries with these little the big drawers and looking for books. And I'm not saying I'm not a Luddite. I believe in the progress of technology, but I have a concern. The human brain has evolved over millions of years to process information in very specific ways. And suddenly we throw at it a completely different reality, which is a virtual reality. And we have no idea whatsoever, no idea what this will do to brains that are developing, children and teenagers. And the temptation is there. We wrote so many essays in universities. And will the universities at the end of the day, have a capability to really distinguish between something that has been written by ChatGPT or by us? I doubt it will be so easy to actually do that, because the models themselves are also getting smarter. So if the kids don't need to memorize, if the kids will be tempted not to write because someone will write for them, I mean, what is left at the end of the day? So this is a topic I know may sound slightly esoteric, but I think it is something which is of great concern to me. That is why when we think about education, especially children and teenagers, not so much higher education, I would urge us to err on the side of caution.
Well, let's think about how you turn some of that into an opportunity, right? Greece has, it punches above its weight when it comes to academics, especially like some of the panels mentioned before, especially in this area, in applied mathematics that has to do with AI, in specifically AI area. I mean, the head of our AI committee, Kostis Daskalakis, is a famous AI computer scientist and mathematician. And we have many examples like that around the world, a very active diaspora. I believe that Greece in NIST, one of the leading conferences, Greek authors were the third most quoted when judged by the names of the people who were contributing. So we have let's say, riches when it comes to academia and the ability to operate and teach human talent in these kinds of things. Can we turn some of these concerns into opportunity?
Yeah, well, we've spoken about the risks. Let's talk a little bit also about the opportunities, because I see many. First of all, we have a very vibrant ecosystem of startup companies active in technology, and in particular, active around AI in Greece. This was not the case. I think 5-10 years ago, we have venture capital firms that have raised significant amounts of money, and it seems to me that what's happening in Greece is already is already being noticed also by people, certainly by investors from the US. So one challenge, and one of the briefs we gave to the committee, is what are some smart ideas to help foster this ecosystem, and what is the infrastructure, what is maybe the public infrastructure that we need to make sure that this ecosystem does much better than what it has already achieved. And some of these ideas, maybe I'm sure you've discussed them, the Daedalus supercomputer, our application to set up to be one of the 7 AI factories in Europe, which I think is very well grounded and very well supported. This will give, I think, an additional impetus to the ecosystem to further develop, to have sort of more companies that emerge out of Greece, more talent returning to Greece. And of course, this also brings us to a question which is very relevant to Europe as a whole, because one of the topics we discussed at the European Council is this competitiveness gap between Europe and the US, to a great extent attributed to productivity related to technology. And of course, we know that, unfortunately now, the natural sort of exit for a startup company, if it were to grow, would be either to to accept usually VC money from one of the big, American investors, or even move to the US. And one of the reasons why companies are moving to the US is because there you have one regulatory environment, whereas in Europe you have 27 regulatory environments. And one of the suggestions that has been put forward, very much supported by me, is that we need sort of a 28th European startup regime, by which if you are part of that regime, you don't need to go through various sort of approvals and regulatory hurdles in all the member states in order for the single market to really work. Think about it. We have so many, almost 400 people in Europe, but when it comes to digital services, we don't operate as a single market. So there's also a European dimension to what I am describing. But certainly, I'm very much looking forward to the specific suggestions of the report. If I look at, the talent, the ecosystem, I mean, your presence here, I was very surprised to see, how many people are actually, involved in this space, the talent. And again, allow me, sorry, I'm not an engineer. So when I try to understand how exactly an LLM model works, I really struggle. I was good at math at school, but that was about it. Then I started doing other things. But there is a breadth of talent in our universities, but also abroad, of people who would want to return to Greece and work out of Greece. And I think it's not that difficult to create sort of the proper environment. It's already happening to a certain extent, but we can do more.
I'll tell you on that, there was a study, actually I just read it, that's why it's top of mind, this think tank in the States called DEON Policy Institute, actually did the largest study of its kind with Greek professors of the diaspora. And I know organizations like HIAS have done similar and asked the question, would you be willing to come back to Greece and teach for at least part of the time, under what conditions, etc. And it was a surprisingly high percentage, and to me, a surprisingly low, because they actually asked what compensation would you need. And I was both surprised by how many were willing to do it and by how much of, let's call it a pay cut, they would be willing to take to be able to partake of the other advantages of quality of life over here.
And of course, when we talk about, our public education system becoming more open, more flexible, more eager to engage in these types of partnerships. I mean, I think we'll announce very soon many interesting, joint degrees. And I'm not talking about the non-profit private university space that is opening up. I'm talking about our public universities and how eager they are to engage, in particular with top US schools. I can see lots of potential. I mean, we have something that is difficult to beat. First of all, for all Greeks, there is always a sense that we want to come back. And of course, I think what the country now offers is a basic sense of stability, and that we're moving in the right direction, and that there are more opportunities today. And that is why I think we are also able to bring back talent. I mean, the brain drain has to a certain extent been reversed. And of course, one may not envision making the same amount of money that one can make abroad, but if one can have a good enough salary, a good enough prospect, and of course, the advantages of, I'm not saying that Greece is a perfect country, but it offers certainly many advantages of living in Greece. This is becoming a compelling proposition, and every time I meet people, also many of you may come from the diaspora, that tell me I'm really considering for the first time to come back to Greece. I think this is a very good sign. I mean, look, there's a global war for talent. Talent is a scarce resource. And that's why we've also given tax incentives to people, Greeks who want to come back. So it would be foolish not to take advantage of the fact that we have so many skilled Greeks abroad, especially in the AI space.
Let's address, you mentioned jobs, and one of the things we did with a group here is we had an email address that people could send questions in, and you could find that they clustered around a few subjects that some of them I think will be no surprise. One has to do with this question of jobs, and will AI take our jobs? Will people's, let's say, meaning of their professional aspirations, the meaning that's attached to that, is that in danger in many ways by AI? On the other hand, as you say, we have a war for talent and unemployment levels that in general have been dropping. So it's a little bit of a conundrum, but how do you, what would you say to people who are concerned about AI taking over our jobs?
I would say that in every big the history of technological breakthroughs, has resulted in jobs being lost and jobs being created. On average, more jobs have been created than have been lost. Granted, AI is a truly transformative technology, but for me, the real challenge is, AI as an enabler to improve productivity. So for example, when we look at, and we have not discussed this, but where can AI help us when it comes to the public administration? For example, if we have, and we're already doing this, we use AI in order to review legal contracts. A process that can take an hour can be done in 10 minutes because most of the preparatory work has already been done. So we're not replacing anyone, we're just making them much more productive. And I do think that the first step clearly will relate to that. And of course, I think it is the obligation, especially of companies, and I saw that you had quite a few companies participating in this gathering today, to use AI in order to improve their productivity. Again, maybe some jobs will be lost, new jobs will be created, but I don't believe that we're faced with a great sort of jobs extinction, at least in the short to medium term. And again, the challenge is how can technology improve the productivity when it comes, for example, to healthcare. There I see probably the most benefits, and there Greece can play a role, because if you have well-curated healthcare data, and we have lots of it, and as we're creating, and I think there we have the potential to actually leapfrog other countries, one can offer this data and come up with very sort of fascinating, I presume, and intriguing solutions to existing problems. So I think there's one thing which is developing innovative solutions, and the second, which is applying existing solutions to processes, whether they're related to the public sector or to the private sector, and improving productivity. It's not that we're going to solve all technological problems in Greece, but if we're smart adopters of technology, we will deliver better public services, and our companies will become more productive.
I remember one of the tasks you gave us when you formed the committee was think of vertical areas where Greece could have, arguably could have a competitive advantage. You just mentioned healthcare potentially being one of them, not because our doctors are necessarily smarter than other people, but because in some ways coming from behind can actually be an advantage if you don't have to deal with legacy systems. You can leapfrog a whole generation. I mean, if you think about what happened to the cell phone companies we all knew when we were growing up, none of them survived the internet and the smartphone movement. It completely shifted. So I wonder if are there other verticals that you think that Greece could play this is a Gringlish translation, protagonistic role?
Well, first of all, let me point out that sometimes the data. First of all, let me take a step back. I think the fact that in 2019 we created the Ministry of Digital Transformation was truly transformative in terms of the governance of offering AI solutions for the broader public sector. Because what we did at the time, and nobody really noticed, all the big databases were essentially integrated within one ministry, so we broke down, the vertical silos. And as the ministry started offering, interesting solutions, all the other ministries wanted to team up with the Ministry of Digital Transformation because ministers understood that there was something in it for them as well. So we created a positive loop for offering the first level of digital solutions, which is what you see with gov.gr and now updated. But this is sort of the basics. This is 1.0. Now we're moving to the smart state at a higher level. And sometimes the solutions are already there. For example, we have a very sophisticated electronic prescription system in Greece. It didn't take rocket science to figure out that by doing some basic cross-checks and using simple tools, we can find the doctors that actually overprescribe. But it was not done for other reasons, not because the technology was not there. So sometimes you need the will. If, for example, we want to sort of control illegal buildings, in Greece, it's not that difficult using spatial mapping and and satellite imagery to see what exactly is being built and understand whether you have a permit for it and whether the footprint of what you see is what has been permitted. These are things which we can do and which we are doing. And one area where I think which is of great interest to me is climate adaptation. Because there, of course, when it comes to wildfires, predicting how a fire will spread, when it comes to advanced, flood flood prevention models, where it comes to more sophisticated, weather prediction systems. There, I think we are already seeing very interesting solutions. And I think we can do interesting things already. And the other sector is also defense. Defense is becoming much more important. In Greece, we had a tradition of buying expensive defense systems from the big, be it the US or France. And of course, you'll always need your planes and your frigates, but there's so much happening in the defense space that is small, decentralized, and that can really be developed by the brilliant talent that we have in Greece, that it would be a pity not to develop it, not only for our purposes, but also to actually become a country that, why not, exports technology. For example, the anti-drone system that we have now on our frigates was developed by, Greek sort of engineers, and having a flexible model of providing sort of initial seed financing for, prototypes and then seeing if that works. I think it's an obligation for us to do it. So I see significant opportunities in defense. So these are, some, because we spend a lot on it, and because our whole philosophy is changing, and it has to change to incorporate the lessons of, for example, the war in Ukraine.
While we're on climate, there was a question that actually a lot of people had, and it was actually posed today as well, about energy efficiency in general. And, some of these AI systems are big consumers of energy. And one might think, well, Greece could have an advantage in terms of green energy, but are there things we should be thinking or doing in light of our natural resources, nuclear? I mean, the US, large companies are even investing in nuclear energy again. What are your thoughts in general about energy efficiency around AI?
Well, first of all, I think there's a new interesting story about the geopolitics of data centers. And Greece has been attracting data centers, and we're doing it because we think that there is a spillover effect. But of course, we also need to be sure that we address the energy issue. And we may actually come to sort of ambitious projects where you have really big data centers, big consumers, which are powered by dedicated energy sources which are off-grid. So this is actually what, to a certain extent, is happening in the US. So two thoughts on this. First of all, on nuclear technology, I've been making the case that when it comes to sort of bringing down our emissions, we need to be technologically agnostic. So we shouldn't say, this is the way to go necessarily, but there's so much investment in clean tech taking place that probably in 5 years we will know much more, and I don't want to place our bets or put our eggs in one basket and realize that at some point there's another technology that is being developed. For example, what's happening with SMRs, small modular reactors, is of great interest to me. We don't have sort of a nuclear background in Greece, but certainly we would be interested in pursuing this technology and seeing where it can lead us. We have islands, for example, that need decentralized systems. Not necessarily all of them will always can be interconnected. And of course, the second thing is, how can AI help us with a system of energy production which is so random? Because renewables are random, and making the system smarter seems to me to be a very complicated optimization problem, to which I'm sure AI would have interesting solutions to offer, because we will always be very dependent on renewables, and of course storage will be part of the solution, and we will need some base load backup. But as we increase the penetration of renewables, having smart stochastic systems that make this complex energy market actually work, that's a good problem to try to address.
And there happen to be some startups that I know have Greek founders around the world that deal with those kinds of things. Very interesting. Last question. Time is up. We have a next panel coming. But last question that also I hear from a lot of, let's say, the more skeptics out there around the world. Like, Greece is a small country. AI is a big global race. Can we really play ball, so to speak, at the Premier League level as a small country?
We can punch above our weights. We certainly can, because we have the talent, and I think we also have a government that is willing to try to educate itself on how it can use AI to be more effective. So certainly we can do this. When I look at what other countries are doing, I don't necessarily see them being so much more advanced than us when it comes to our thinking. But again, our biggest asset is our talent. So if we can bring, develop enough good sort of brains around AI, but certainly leverage those people who are active in the AI space abroad, and bring them to Greece or to Greek-related projects, and build the right infrastructure, definitely we can do this. And after all, who knows where the next big idea is going to come from? This is, sure, there is a question of scale. You need, hundreds of billions or trillions to invest in those, in the huge infrastructure, but that's not necessarily what AI is all about.
For me, and we'll close it there, for me, this kind of commitment, having you here today at an event like this, we have a lot of the elements in Greece, as you say. We have academia, we have talent, we have a lot of elements. The story has not yet been told fully, but it is through things like your presence at events like this and committing and the kind of work you're doing with this committee, and hopefully seeing some of these, to come to light, some of the initiatives, is that kind of commitment that I think gives us a chance.
Well, I almost invited myself to be here because I really wanted to communicate this message.
And this is what I'm talking about. So thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
You honor us with your presence. Ready? Thank you.
Thanks, Adrian.
Thank you.